Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited today to be joined by Alan Holland, the founder and CEO of Keelvar. Alan, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you very much, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
So this is all part of the AgentIQ Procurement Education Series, where we're trying to help procurement leaders understand more about what AI can do. And there is no better voice in the industry than Alan because of Alan's background. Alan, tell us, your history as an AI lecturer, I think, is rather important here.
Yes, I'm based here in Cork in the south of Ireland, where we had good fortune to have one of Europe's largest AI research laboratories. And so I did a PhD in computer science and within that AI lab, and went on to lecture in AI for years, teaching a top masters in intelligent systems. And Keelvar system. Keelvar is an Irish word meaning intelligent, so the company name is kind of related.
Right. I did not know that. So I've learned something already. I'm sure our audience has as well. So when we spoke in the past about this, I know you were inspired by adversarial learning and game theory models like Go and Texas Hold'em, which I'm a fan of myself. I do like a game of poker. That led you to start Keelvar. What was it you saw in procurement that made you think that AI could make an impact?
And well, when I was a researcher in the university, I was collaborating with e-commerce companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon, and it was, in fact, our conferences and the AI conferences were called ACM e-commerce because it was all around game theory and use of optimization and machine learning and AI within making e-commerce more efficient, and how should Amazon set their prices? How should Google auction their sponsored search results, and so on and so on. And then to pay my way, when I was a PhD student, I had been working with a parents' company, and they'd given me the job of dealing with procurement. So that's how I came across procurement in B2B, and I was able to see the stark contrast in efficiency and speed in B2B versus e-commerce.
Right. Okay. And so now, in the first iteration of what Keelvar offered, how was that sort of your thinking incorporated into the sort of first offering that you had?
Yeah. So so the world is all talk about agents presently, but there was actually trading agent contest I used to be involved in AI research lab 15 years ago, where we were simulating a year in the life of the supply chain of a laptop manufacturing business. So how would you run your business if you had autonomous agents that were doing all your sourcing, all your selling, all your factory scheduling, and so on, and they'd all be interoperable. So the vision for Keelvar was to deliver autonomous agents that are continuously learning and adaptive, perceiving when they need to do work, what exactly to do, what's the optimal strategy, given the nature of that spend category in the market you're sourcing from. And so it was way ahead of its time. So our early days weren't the easiest. Back, like I started Keelvar in September 2012, and it was actually, it took quite a while to get going, right? But the first we didn't start by selling agents because, well, the market wasn't ready for it, and there was a lot of work to be done in terms of the workflow engine that would run the sourcing events. So we started with a sourcing optimizer, which is it's akin to the kind of a Ferrari of e-sourcing. It's very powerful, but not every company has the drivers for Ferrari. So our vision was to provide a Ferrari, train a few drivers, and then provide the robotic drivers. So you've kind of full self-driving Ferrari, right? That's what you can, I suppose, how you can think of in terms of agent operated sourcing on a sourcing optimizer workflow engine.
It must be really difficult. I've seen one of the articles you interviewed for recently where you sort of were viewed as a group of techies, and you think about the skepticism that's still around now about AI and agentic. 15 years ago, you must have been getting some very strange looks.
Yeah, I did. I was. I think when you come out of university, you're not really aware of how much of a crank you sound like to others, and too many people are so polite they won't tell you. So you have to figure out the slow way. So you have to dial it back. And I've actually found it very odd going back when sometimes give presentations to research groups in AI research labs that I had to change my whole vocabulary and remove certain words from my vocabulary that didn't make any sense to, I would say, the public, but that from a scientist perspective, they were correct and unambiguous, and that's what scientists tend to go for. But it was just too esoteric and seemed too irrelevant. And I tried to make it relevant by saying that look at the world of finance, look at how trading has evolved, and now there's algorithmic trading. You're going to be looking at algorithmic supply chain management and algorithmic procurement. And people I think people started to believe it when you could point to things like, say, poker agents. You could start to have analogies where you talk about, look at these other spheres where people are playing games. When you're involved in an auction, you're playing a game, just as someone would playing a game of chess or poker. And computer scientists are tackling those and solving those. And the agents who are competing in poker tournaments are now beating the world champions. So that's what I would say. Leaders in procurement were interested and could see, yeah, that's where we're going to end up. But the path to there and the timeline to there was always a little unclear.
Yeah, indeed. It just reminds me, really, because I played a poker school, and one of my close friends who's a real techie, whilst playing poker a few years ago, he told me about where I think AI beating the champions at Go, and it was the first time. It was a massive breakthrough, as I remember. And at the time, I'm ashamed to admit, I didn't take a great deal of notice of him. We were talking about, he's just Jim being a bit techie there. But looking back now, that was obviously a seminal moment in development, wasn't it, really?
It was, and I think in some of those games they use a technique called adversarial learning, where you could have agents who are playing other agents, so they could play thousands and millions of games against each other. So they're always improving and always learning. And how do you compete against a software agent that can do that much work?
Yeah.
Well, you can't, right? So as long as I would say that the intelligence systems are constructed in a way that models the game and the details of the game well, and has a model of the world that reflects accurately the nature of that game, then these agents are always going to exceed human performance when you can measure the qualitative aspects of the game.
Yeah, indeed. So in procurement, your thinking's ahead of its time, really, or certainly was when you embarked on this journey. I know you've been quoted saying that procurement tools need to evolve past the old tech stacks, and that modern procurement teams need best-of-breed ecosystems, not the sort of monolithic suites they've been used to. What are the biggest technology adoption traps you see procurement leaders fall into in your recent work?
Yeah, I would say the biggest trap is that false economy of thinking a cheap procurement technology is the best.
Right.
That it's actually it's possibly one of the most expensive mistakes businesses are making. There's quite a bit of legacy tech hanging around procurement now, where some players just flogging it. They know they're not investing in it anymore, but they'll compete on price. They think, let's tempt procurement into selling this for 20 or 30K when it's, there's a 200 or 300K or a 2 million alternative which is actually getting invested in. And the problem is there's I would say old systems are actually costing tens or hundreds of millions in lost opportunities. So that is actually, and you don't see it in other domains. You don't see as much legacy tech in sales orgs, for example. Once a system is legacy and old, like Siebel systems, all these they're gone, they're cleared out.
Yeah.
Whereas we've still got them hanging around procurement. Like, why hasn't procurement defended its patch and said, no, we're not going to use a system that's 20 years old anymore, and that the world has moved on. So I would say that's the biggest trap. And in some ways that it can be that the buck has been passed to suppliers who are paying, and so then it seems like, freebie. What's not to love about a freebie? Well, it's the lost opportunity and massive savings lost. That it's an indirect expense. But that's the most common trap we're seeing.
Are some procurement departments guilty of resistance to change by being wedded to those old legacy systems, do you think?
Yeah, and I think what we found, and something that we have now is a building the business case for investing in technology has been a challenge for them. They weren't, I suppose, equipped to develop that style of business case. So we've been helping some of our prospects and customers to better understand the business value realization, and that has been very important. And many of our customers have been really thankful for a team that we've now got in place to provide that service, because they need to be able to talk to their colleagues and their CFO and say, yeah, guys, the ROI here is huge. This is probably the highest ROI in any function across the business. So let's double down on it.
Yeah, indeed. It's interesting you mentioned you've got a dedicated team. So, I mean, in my work through Every Daily, several years ago, worked with all the really big names in the marketplace to build a sort of value engineering team. And that was part of its remit. And we were particularly hiring out of the big four consultancies and Accenture and places like that across Europe. And that was going back to about 2016, 2017. More recently, I've seen sales leaders ask me, I want somebody who's really proficient in that area to help the customer build the business case.
Yeah.
That's actually, I think, quite difficult to find in a typical account executive type role. I think you need a very experienced practitioner personally to be able to contribute to that. And I'm guessing you've got different sort of skill sets within that team to have different perspectives, have you?
Exactly. I would say that team is critical, and very often it's right. There's the soft skills and the hard skills that you need to combine, and that's what makes it difficult to find the right person for that type of role, because there's a lot of soft skills in terms of talking to individuals about where value has been and actually teasing out of them the different dimensions where you're getting value. And like in the case of sourcing optimization, what's happening is that business wants to reduce costs, but it doesn't want to increase lead times and have poor quality goods or services, or it doesn't want to have security issues and all these other dimensions. So it's like you've got to pan across all of these dimensions and then say, okay, how it's a kind of multi-criteria optimization problem.
Right.
And what are all those criteria? Because it's a wide spectrum, and how are we going to try and establish some measure for how we're increasing value in these different dimensions? And sometimes it's more subjective, and other times it can be more objective. So you try and make things as objective as possible, but you can't always do so. So that's a tricky skill set.
It certainly is, and I mentioned to you before we started recording that I was at Mark Pryor's Bars and Bills event yesterday, and there was a number of really insightful discussions, and one of them really touched quite well on that whole building the business case, to go to a CFO for the investment. And similarly, the work that I'm doing with agentic procurement, which is part of this series that we're recording, we're doing a leadership diagnostic, which I'm going to. I was actually working on the train on the way back from London last night, and I'm going to publish it later on this week. And part of the question is around the ability to and the confidence almost to construct the business case for investment. So I agree, it's a very, very important part. And I know other sort of best of breed tools that have got that sort of evangelical sell where you're trying to convince the customer that they can benefit from the investment, are also evaluating how best to approach that particular challenge. But clearly, your dedicated team, I suspect you're ahead of the market there, as indeed you have been historically, because you've been working with agent-like automation long before it became a buzzword because of your background. So can you, for our audience, define agentic AI in sourcing?
Yeah. So the autonomous agents, right, as kind of defined classically in AI, these are software systems that can perceive when to act, right? So they're polling the environment, monitoring what's happening. You're always in a changing environment. So things that could be changing are your suppliers are failing, or market prices are changing, or on the demand side, your demand for some commodities is going up or going down. So there's all of these potential triggers that an agent should be monitoring. And it should, now it could be simple triggers, like these are the thresholds in which to act, or it could be more adaptive learning of triggers. So understanding the policies and automatically updating their policies on when is a good time to act. And so that's I would say the first step in the process for an agent, that knowing when to act and being able to trigger itself, right? And then there's the end-to-end execution. So an agent should be able to run the entire sourcing process end to end without an approval. Or you can put in approvals, so that's something you should be able to insert. But some of our customers don't want that because they're running some processes so fast that they want completely autonomous end to end. So, and then in sourcing, when you look at the process, there's actually 7 steps in sourcing, and this is where your simple agents that are kind of wrappers around LLMs, they won't work, because they just do single step tasks.
Right.
What you want is reasoning, and this is what kind of separates AI agents from, let's say, task-based agents, right?
And rules-based automation, because a lot of people are still confused about that who aren't as technically sort of savvy as you. Where's the difference like there?
So there's some workflows which you wouldn't call AI agents. They're deterministic workflows where it's the same input, it's the same workflow that gets executed every time. That's what we call level 4 high automation, but not an autonomous level 5 agent, right? So, but level 4 is a good place to be, and some of our customers that's all they want. They want to know it's going to run the same process every time, and they feel more comfortable that don't learn, don't change. We're happy with this. Now, there's usually a point in time where they're running that for a year or 18 months, and they're going, actually, you know what? We can see that markets are changing, things are evolving. What was excellent in terms of workflow to execute, now it's just very good. And if we just keep doing this forever, it actually won't be a great process in another year or 2 years. So they start to realize that that's a means to an end. So you're kind of level 4 high automation, that's deterministic. That's good. It's like lots of companies would say, if you can get to there, you're doing well, right? And then you actually have some time to do more of those get more of those workflows up to that level. Then you'll turn around a year or 2 years later and go, yeah, that's we need, because you start, right, the people who used to do that work, they might be gone from the org, they could be gone somewhere else. So then you now have a workflow that should be adapting and improving to changes in our environment, our needs, or the supply market, and it won't, right, if it's left like that. So what I would say an AI agent should be doing is not doing the same workflow every time, but tweaking it, always changing,
evolving, learning.
Like a good football team, right? You take a good football team. If they go out and they just do the same strategy every single time, they get predictable. The market learn, the opposition learn that they always, from a kickoff, do this, or from a corner, and that's not good to be predictable in these games. And that's the whole thing about game theory. The other players on the field are looking at you and figuring out your weaknesses. So you've always got to be changing. So what an AI agent should be doing is go faster, go slower, invite more bidders, fewer bidders, give them dollar-based feedback in terms of targets, change it up, change it to, let's say, it could be red, green, amber, kind of traffic light feedback. Always be changing, and then always be analyzing, did this work better or not? So there's simple learning algorithms that you can start to apply. This is a field of AI that you won't have heard of, right? So it's called algorithmic mechanism design. Now, I mentioned to start, we're collaborating with the likes of Amazon and Google. They were doing this 15 years ago. They weren't standing up in conferences talking about it because it's so impactful for the business. They didn't want
competitive advantage.
Competitive advantage. This is really the heart of I would say efficiency in B2B procurement is in areas like algorithmic mechanism design.
Yeah, interesting. And when your customers are coming to you and say, okay, we want to move on from level 4 to level 5, is that because there's a better understanding, they develop their AI literacy, their AI fluency, but also that keyword that I think I've been talking to a lot of procurement leaders about recently, trust?
Yeah, I think it's that there's trust, right? Just trusting in a system. And if you're kind of new to using this, then it's better to start with level 4 because it requires less trust. It's like, that's the workflow. That's what's going to execute every single time. Just start there, but then you will start to see, and you'll be really happy with it, because it's like, Jesus, it's just doing it faster, and it's doing a really good process. It's like it's dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, and it's making sure everything that we would tell a sourcing manager to do is done to the nth degree every time. But then you see it done 100 times, 1,000 times, and you're going, you know what, we should be kind of learning from, because we could see there's edge cases where we don't do so well. And then you start to get, you naturally want to move on to improve. And that's, I would say, that's when we say, well, now it's a business problem that's inspiring AI rather than AI for the sake of AI. That when they come to us saying, we're closing the event after 15 minutes if we receive 3 bids, and then but we're leaving it open until 25 minutes if we've only received 2. We don't know if that's a good thing or not. And we say, we've got AI for that, right? That's called optimal stopping, and that's a well-known problem in AI. And there's lots of, so we've now, do you want to turn that on? So it's like, turn that on. And now you've the AI to learn the probability distribution on closing time, and when you're going to get the next bid, if you got, when depending on the time you get your first and second and third bids. So, and what's your patience level? So in different settings, you might be more or less patient. And that's when you're moving into real expert grade. Then your AI agent is like, that's doing better than any human could do on that task within the sourcing process. So, and there's lots of those tasks within sourcing that all require different subfields of AI to exceed human expert performance. And then when you put them all together and you have AI agent that's telling you, okay, these are the suppliers you should really be inviting. This is the process you should run. This is the speed of it. This is, and that, and so on and so on. And doing so with vast quantities of data that's informing those expert decisions, then any kind of expert in the category would look at it and go, oh, geez, could not compete with that.
Yeah, indeed.
Just as a poker champion would look at an optimal poker agent and go, man, we're beaten.
Yeah, I'll calculate all the probabilities and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So agents doing all this work to a level which humans can only aspire to. And I remember Adam Brown in a presentation about Keelvar at DPW last year, and I think he talked about with the last mile for Maersk. I think he said 24 quadrillion different permutations, and of course that's an example of what no human could ever be able to, human brain could ever handle. So with agents doing that sort of work at that level, what's the role of the human then in the procurement team?
And there's still loads of work for humans. Right? That's the thing, right? Now you need someone who's kind of recognizing when it's doing a great job or when it's like, no, this isn't working. I can see why. And it's almost like machines will never build trust with your suppliers, right? You need to be there monitoring what it's doing. And I would say this is all the tactical entail. This is like high velocity, lower spend negotiations. You still want your people doing the annual bid, the large strategic decisions around, like, should we be giving more than 20% of our volume annually to this supplier when their operational, their on-time performance has been trending down, that our finance team saying that supplier could have challenged. So there's these, I would say, strategic decisions that humans should still be making, and it's really important that they make. And also talking to suppliers about what innovations they've got, what new technologies or new approaches. It might actually cost more, but it could be the future. It could be, if we're not understanding this better and we're not working with them, then we could be missing a trick, and it could be too late to respond. So I'd say the more interesting work, rather than being down in the weeds of when to close this bid event, whether to invite 3 or 4 suppliers to this, that's very tactical. It's all the tactical routine work that you hand off to the agents. It's the strategic, the risk management, the innovation discovery, the relationship management, and building trust. When in times of trouble, when, like say, when COVID hit, if you actually had built trust with suppliers, you were ahead of the queue for
of course,
getting your stuff moved. That's always going to be really critical. So we're still going to need lots of people. That's kind of
indeed. And if we look at the work we've done with Agentic, if you look at the research we published last year with Simon Gill of Proxima, when we looked at digital skills before we really embraced the AI era, we talked a lot about supplier relationship management, storytelling. So the suppliers and the stakeholders building that trust, and so that being a very important part of the communication and such like that goes with that. But now, as we've defined our 7 skills for the AI era, with the focus on the ones that we think are most relevant to AI, critical and strategic thinking, 2 of the 7, and that very much ties in that point you've made there. And I think that we are going to see new roles emerge, and to your point earlier about the evolution of the thinking with your customers from the level 4 to level 5. People who start to really interact much more closely to develop and train agents and understand their capability. I think that's one example of what the roles we think are going to orchestration being another as well.
And for people not to panic, if they're not on the AI agent bandwagon, they're haven't deployed any AI agents, not to worry, in that just automating kind of deterministic workflows, sourcing workflows from end to end that aren't even AI operated, but that give you the platform to then. Because switching on AI, like that example of optimal stopping, that's just a toggle. like once you've automated your workflow and you're happy with, you've designed it, and it's like, this is what I want to do, then you can start turning on adaptation and learning. And it's people shouldn't panic about it.
I think the difference between understanding how it works and building it, which is what you guys do, and understanding how to use it. AI literacy, if you will, AI fluency. And for those that are daunted by it, the best thing you can do is just get on and start trying to engage it, whether it be a Gen AI tool or at home, or it be a tool like Keelvar in the workplace. But I think those that are sort of daunted and fearful of it, you need to just get started. Start experimenting, be curious, and learn on the way. Because the best way to learn AI, in my opinion, is just to engage with it. But these new roles that are evolving, we'll be doing some.
You mentioned an important topic, because you said Gen AI there, right? So one thing to bear in mind, and I don't think most people working in procurement aren't familiar with, say, all the subfields of AI, and that Gen AI is just one of them. It's a really exciting new one, and so it's the one that a lot of people are diving in as kind of consumer, using it to suggest I'm a tourist in Venice, where should I visit?
Right? I did it for New York for DPP this year.
And it's super. But suggests to me a strategy I should use for sourcing steel parts in Brazil. It's like, whoa, no, maybe not, because it'll suggest suppliers that don't exist, and it'll do all sorts of things that look plausible but aren't feasible. So it's knowing the boundaries for when Gen AI is like, no, that's not
actually critical thinking, is it? That's when critical thinking comes, the ability to assess its outputs, whether it be Gen or agentic or whatever it may be. And this is where it's quite interesting. I think people of our age, Alan, who are the most fearful about it, actually, they're equipped with the experience that will underpin that critical thinking. And that's vital.
And that experience is critical, because they're increasingly going to see young grads come in and say, look, I've got a strategy for sourcing steel parts for oil rigs here in Brazil. And they'll have the experience to look through and go, no, that doesn't make any sense. Who's that supplier? It's like, do they exist? Am I missing out on a supplier? And then they go, no, that's actually just hallucinated. And that's so now there's another subfield of AI called recommender systems, which is ideal, right? Which is and it will be accurate and precise, and it will learn from training sets. So that's the subfield of AI we are using for supplier discovery, right? And so there's the right tool in the AI toolbox for every challenge.
Yeah, indeed.
And AI is often not the right one.
And your ProcureTech event, which I was kind of invited to, the Professor from Oxford, didn't you, on, and you were on the panel with him, and that was where that was touched on, wasn't it? And I think you gave actually a great example of how Keelvar applies that. I'm not going to try and explain. Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
I'm struggling to remember what the example was.
It was about when it's not always necessary to look at historical market behaviours because they're not relevant. Sometimes you've got to just focus on specific criteria right now. It was some discussion around that. There's so much to take in that day. It was a wonderful day of education, but I think there was one particular example you talked about.
Maybe it's sort of adaptation and learning that, is it necessary to kind of run a detailed spend analytics project before you get started? I would argue no, right? What you can do is you can start learning now. So you can just start sourcing and you can start learning and start switching on your learning. And faster you do that, and you start adapting to the efficacy of decisions you're making now. That is the fastest route, because if you look at, say, prices you paid for items last year before, markets change. It's like,
yeah, that was it.
Data goes out of date. It's like food. It's like fresh food. It goes out of date so fast that you really shouldn't look too far back in the rear view mirror. Instead, kind of be looking forward, and focus on adaptation and learning based on decisions you're making now.
Yeah. So no one else ever said that. I guess a lot of presentations, a lot of events, as everyone knows, no one said that. And that was a point which I thought, right, I'm going to ask Alan to come on this and record this video. That was I thought, right, this guy's got different perspectives from other people. Also, last time we spoke, you mentioned that some of the Keelvar customers are starting to hire people with different profiles who perhaps understand procurement and technology, some hybrid profiles.
Yeah.
What do you think that means for the future of procurement operating models and how they're going to develop?
Yeah, I think it's just been I would say our highest performing customers. We've seen them visit our office and bring someone from procurement, someone from strategy and IT strategy, and product managers. And this is the kind of new one that opened my eyes. I was like, oh, you're a product manager. I thought it was only a software companies hired product managers. But it's absolutely the right thing for them to be doing. They're looking at their own landscape. Large enterprises often have their own internal tools they've built, third-party tools, and they have this complex landscape, and they have APIs connecting them. So they've got data flowing between systems, making them all work in the way you need. So it's very seamless. It's a product management challenge, right? So they are looking to build their landscape in a way that, I would say, composability is key. And it used to be that IT would say, here's a big suite, 12 different products in there. Third-party vendors sorted out all interoperability. Let's trust that that's all okay. And very often it's not all okay, and they're not maybe that well synchronized or connected. But you should be, because with modern APIs, you should be able to do that yourself more easily and make sure you've got the data flowing between systems in the way you need. And having people who can talk that language of APIs to software vendors is invaluable. So you've got the integrations working the way you need. And that way it gives you the optionality to say, that vendor is the best at what they do over there. Let's bring them in. That vendor is the best at what they do over there. Let's bring them in and make sure the systems are all working with each other and our existing systems. And they can get up to speed in weeks, right? So it's not like these 2-3. I've heard of 2-3 year implementation projects, and when you hear of that, you know that ain't going to work, because you get to the end of that 3-4 years, and it's like, oh, you're going to start again and take that out and forever.
I think I know who you're talking about, and I was involved in him joining the organisation, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about where I'm going to find more people like that, because my expectation is probably next year I'll start to see the growth in demand for that sort of profile of individual from CPOs. And there's a talent pool which I've nurtured for a while, but there's only so many of them. And then we're going to start thinking very, very laterally about how we find the transferable skills required to go into those roles. I think we're going to start, as recruiters, we're going to start looking in less obvious places to find these profiles, and it's actually going to be a real challenge. And I can't wait, to be honest with you, because I think it's going to be really professionally difficult for us to do that, which is going to mean our skills and network is more valuable, but also it's actually difficult work. And that, as you know it yourself, is what people enjoy, the challenge of a difficult project. Not just another category manager from the company down the road, but actually, okay, we need this skill set. Where are we going to find it? What does this human being look like? Where have they worked? What have they done?
these kind of cross-functional teams, right? Where that's actually the most interesting work for people. Like when they're all I suppose different skill sets represented in the same meetings. They're all learning from each other, but they're all gaining business context, so they're not siloed. And very often that's been one of the biggest blockers to growth for large enterprises is the siloing of functions who don't understand what the left arm not understanding what the right arm is doing. But when you've got a cross-functional team and they're all of that, I would say, learning and that tacit learning that's happening when people are discussing various challenges that aren't directly relevant to them, but knowing how two other teams are coordinating, it gives great contextual awareness and also the transferable skills. So if you've got gaps emerging within your own business, people can move from one team to another, and because they can see, I could do that, or that's related to some other work I did in my career earlier, and that's really healthy for a business.
Absolutely. I think for businesses that are going to really embrace AI, their operating models and the profiles and the jobs people are in them are going to look very, very different in probably 3 to 5 years, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right. This has been fascinating, Alan. We've spoken longer than I anticipated. I hope everyone's enjoying it. So I've got one final question for you. CPOs know AI is coming, but a lot of them don't know where to start. They're a bit daunted by it. What's your advice for CPOs and their leadership teams who want to move beyond pilots and actually start using AI in a meaningful way? How do they do that?
Yeah, so they should probably take half a dozen kind of categories or subcategories of spend and say, we want to automate all our sourcing below some spend threshold.
Right.
And our most successful customers have been very decisive about doing that. They've said, if the spend is below a certain threshold, then it doesn't make sense for people to be heavily involved. It makes sense to automate it all. So we're going to automate everything under these thresholds. And then everyone's clear. Everyone's like, okay, these are the 6 areas where we're going to automate everything. And once you have those 6 successful stories, and I'd say it's about prescriptive kind of deterministic workflows initially.
Yeah.
So that people don't need to be fearful about AI doing its own thing. It's like, no, this will do precisely what you want it to do, and have it rules based. So cut out the fear factor that some people have, and then let that run for a while, and then you'll see, then people will be coming to you with opportunities. It's like, if we switch on these things, it'll start learning. It'll start going to a wider cross section of suppliers. It'll start running the events faster, and so on and so on. And that's when you've got a platform to have kind of AI enrichment of your sourcing strategy, and that's actually the easy part. Then it's because you have buy-in, and people start to trust it, and it's going to take time.
Yeah,
have to give it to set it up, get it running, but be clear, this is what we're automating. And then once it's automated for a period, it's like, then you have a willing audience. Everyone is like, all right, makes sense.
Absolutely. And the key thing is that everybody will learn so much on the journey.
That's it. Yeah. And have your cross-functional teams that are all learning as they're going, so that you're bringing everyone on board.
Wonderful, Alan. That's been fascinating, insightful. I can't thank you enough. I'm sure our audience has found that really interesting, and I'm sure they want to talk to you about what Keelvar can offer. What's the best way to get you personally? Is it via LinkedIn or your email?
LinkedIn is great. It's great for me. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to talk to anyone who feels this is of interest to their business.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I have done. I've learned a great deal today again, and if any of the subjects we've touched on about hiring, skills, talent, of course, you can get me. Everyone knows I pretty much live on LinkedIn. And Alan, I'm sure will be glad to hear it. But thank you so much, Alan. Really appreciate your time, and I hope we get plenty of follow-up.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew.